Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Griffith-Lorenz, and I am a student in History 390, and this is going to be my presentation on my research topic over the effects of the Franco-Prussian War for Bismarck and the Prussians. Now, this is kind of important to a broad range in European history, especially considering that this war has a historical significance in the foundations of the First World War, especially considering how embarrassed the French were following this war, and we're going to take a look at some of the effects. Alright, so the road to war. So on 3 July 1866, an envoy was sent from Napoleon III to the Prussian royal headquarters following their victory at Königgrätz. Rising Francophobic attitudes as well as anti-Prussian attitudes in both France and Prussia led to deeper mistrust and anger between the two nations. So this led to some failed negotiations by Emile Olivier after the Ems incident. This incident spread from a telegram that basically read to the Spanish crown that the Crown Prince of Prussia had a candidacy toward the opening of the role, and the French really didn't like this, especially considering that Napoleon III kind of felt slighted by this. So after this incident and the failed negotiations, there is no diplomatic outcome following this. Prussian newspapers see the Ems incident and the declaration of war by the French on 15 July 1870, and they begin printing a series of jingoistic articles to drum up popular support for war. When war is declared by France on 15 July 1870, it is delivered to Bismarck 4 days later on 19 July 1870. So some key events during the war. The Prussians quickly mobilized their reserves, utilizing their rail system. The French faced exceedingly difficult problems with mobilization due to the French rail system, which at the time had 4 main lines and caused a massive traffic jam leading from their mobilization points to where the Germans were approaching. On 6 August 1870, the Battle of Sprichen sets the tone for the war, and it begins a pattern of Prussian victories. The Prussians also see another victory at Fosche-Weiler Worth. This leads the French to begin their retreat to Metz. On 14 August 1870, the French retreat from the city of Metz and the fortress surrounding Metz. On 16 August 1870, the Battle of Mars-la-Tour is fought, and there is no true victor. Both sides see horrendous casualties, and there is no set meaning of victory. If anything comes from the Battle of Mars-la-Tour, it is a Pyrrhic German victory, because the French continue to retreat from the battlefield even though there is no strategic or tactical gains by the Prussians. On 18 August 1870, the Battle of Gravelotte is fought. The Prussians will walk away victorious from this. On 30 August 1870, the Prussians and Bavarians rout the French at Beaumont, inflicting grievous casualties. On September 1870, the French are once again routed at Sedan, and amongst the prisoners are Napoleon III, who sends an adjutant to negotiate a ceasefire and try to sue for peace. The peace. Following Sedan, the French provincial government rushes in newly conscripted troops. These troops suffer defeat after defeat, starting at Orleans and not ending to Haricot in January of 1871. The French are subjected to brutal military failures in 2 separate sieges of Paris. On 28 July 1871, the war effectively ends. By 26 February 1871, peace preliminaries are agreed upon and terms are set. On 3 March 1871, the peace is officially agreed upon. The French are to cede all of Alsace and a third of Lorraine, and the French are to pay 5,000 million francs to the Prussians. 1,000 million is owed in 1871, and the rest within 3 years. The Prussians are to occupy the territories that France still controls until 2,000 million francs are paid, and then they will withdraw slowly. Now, the effects on Prussia, which is what I will really be kind of studying in this paper coming up. So the war effectively helped Bismarck take the remaining German states, the Catholic states of South Germany, basically the 6 states that he wasn't able to directly take control of, would fold into the Prussian state following this. Alsace-Lorraine would later become the center argument for Germanness following the war. And this also led to many arguments amongst German and French intellectuals regarding what they saw as either French or German. Following the war, the Prussians would see an increase in German nationalism, leading to them building the Reichstag in 1889. And an interesting note from that, Bismarck originally wanted the quote above the Reichstag to read "for the German people." He wouldn't get this because the Kaiser would effectively tell him, no, we are to remain a monarchy under me. So also following the war, the Prussians would seek favorable diplomatic ties with nations such as Austria, Italy, and Russia, all who saw a united Germany as favorable. Prussia replaced France as the main military and cultural exporter of Europe, which also included nations like Japan, which would see an increase in Prussian military assistance. Sorry about that. The Franco-Prussian War would directly influence later wars such as World War I, both in the tactics of the German Empire, the Prussians, and the French animosity toward anything Germanic. We see this in 1914 when the Germans initially crossed through Belgium and into France. They tried to seek a quick war like they did during the War of 1871. And they essentially follow the same playbook until it devolves into trench warfare. Now, I want to study this because it's an interesting topic. The field of history would say that while there is a plethora of sources on this topic, it is still kind of understudied in the field of both the attitudes of France and Germany. Now, I'm trying to focus solely on the German perspective of this, since the Germans were the victor. And it also has a very, very interesting kind of forward into later parts of history, especially in the First World War. And following the First World War into the Treaty of Versailles, which would effectively see France inflicting the same kind of treaty on the Germans. Now, this is interesting in the way that history always plays into itself, and we see this with both this war and the First World War. Thank you for listening to my long-winded video. I'm sorry for the camera bounce. This is currently being filmed in a barracks room in an undisclosed location, so thank you guys for watching, and hopefully this paper goes well.